بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وصل على المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات وبارك على محمد وأزواجه وذريته. Respected brothers and sisters, in the previous lesson we studied the stories of the first migrants from the Meccan people to Medina Munawwara. We studied their sacrifices, some of the difficulties that they encountered during the Hijrah to Medina Munawwara. We also studied that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was awaiting instructions from Allah Azza wa Jal to migrate. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu had asked him, "O Rasulullah, what is the situation about our migration? When are we going to migrate?" And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Don't be hasty, wait." And when we think deeply about this situation, why hasn't the Prophet ﷺ migrated yet and everybody else has migrated and there's only a few people left behind? It actually shows us the leadership qualities of Rasulullah ﷺ. That as a leader, he is waiting for others to depart safely and to arrive at their destination safely, and he's ensuring that things are taken care of within Mecca before he departs. Just like the commander of an army would do, or just like the captain of a ship that is sailing, the captain will not disembark before everybody else. He will ensure everybody else has disembarked first, and then he will leave the ship, so on and so forth. So Rasulullah ﷺ is awaiting the instructions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But before that happens, before the instruction is delivered to him or revealed to him, there's a few things that happen. And what you're seeing so far is that the story of the Hijrah is a lengthy story and there are a few parts to it. So inshallah today we're going to study a few parts of that story, beginning with the council of the leaders of the Quraysh in Darun Nadwa. Darun Nadwa was the parliament. This is where all of the important issues were discussed and agreed upon. No decision was made except in Darun Nadwa. Nadwa means council, Dar means home, and this was the home of Qusay bin Kilab, one of the forefathers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quraysh had appointed this place as the place to convene and to decide all important matters. So, once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had sent a group of Muslims to Medina, the Quraysh realized that now this man has a following outside of Mecca, a group that is willing to support him, that are loyal to him, that will fight for him. And the people of Medina are no weak people. They have brave people. They have people with weapons. And our sovereignty, our position is under threat. Perhaps this man Muhammad will also leave, like some of his companions have left, and he will join ranks with the Medinan people, and he will become so strong and emboldened that he will also march upon us one day. So before this happens, we need to decide his fate. Something needs to happen about him. We need to stop him in his tracks. So they agreed upon a meeting at Darun Nadwa. So this is how the story unfolds. What happens in Darun Nadwa? First and foremost, we mentioned that Darun Nadwa was the parliament. And Darun Nadwa, I mentioned, was one of the forefathers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Qusay bin Kilab's home. And later on, this house was purchased by an individual known as Hakim bin Hizam. Hakim bin Hizam later on became Muslim. And during the caliphate of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he sold it. And he sold it for a very small sum. At this point, he's a Muslim. So somebody rebuked him and said, how can you sell such a, imagine if you own the White House and you sold the White House for a very small sum. Somebody would say to you, that's a prestigious place. It's an honorable place. It's a noble place. How can you sell it for such a small sum? So Hakim bin Hizam said, do you know how I purchased it? I purchased it with a receptacle of alcohol and wine. And now I'm a Muslim. And I'm selling it for this much, and everything I earn from it, I'm going to give it in the path of Allah. Be witness to it. So Hakim bin Hizam had no desire for that wealth. Of course, when somebody's heart changes, their heart is transformed, then these things mean nothing to them. So this was the situation of Darun Nadwa. So what happens? The Quraysh, they decide that they're going to meet at Darun Nadwa. The day was identified, it was fixed, it was a Thursday, 26th of Rajab. Now Rajab is the second month of the Islamic calendar. Currently we are in the month of, the third month of the Islamic calendar. Seventh, what am I thinking about? Muharram, Safar, Rabi'ul Awwal, Rabi'ul Akhir, Jumad al-Ula, Jumad al-Ukhra, Rajab, seventh month of the Islamic calendar. Every horse slips, right? Every horse slips. So yeah, seventh month is the seventh month of the Islamic calendar, Rajab. So we're in the month of Rajab right now. So this is happening approximately 3 months after the bay'ah, when the Ansar came and made the bay'ah, the pledge, the second pledge, al-Aqaba al-Thaniya. This is happening about 3 months after that. So it's 26th of the month of Rajab, and we're currently in the month of Rajab. So this month has a lot of significance if you think about it. Now what happens is, the day was fixed. Who's gathering? Who is attending this meeting? All of the leaders, all of the people of opinion, whose opinion is highly sought, people of nobility. So I'm going to mention some of the attendees. Abu Jahl from Banu Makhzum. So now Quraysh is the big tribe. And under Quraysh there are different clans. Banu Makhzum is one clan, Banu Abdiddar, Banu Abdul Shams, Banu Abd Munaf, Banu Hashim, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's family. So there are different clans. So noble people from each clan are attending this meeting. So Abu Jahl, may Allah curse him, from Banu Makhzum, he attends this. Utbah and Shayba, the sons of Rabi'ah, and Abu Sufyan from Banu Abd Shams. Tu'aymah ibn Adi, Jubair ibn Mut'im bin Adi, who later on became Muslim. Jubair bin Mut'im became Muslim later on, and Abu Sufyan also became Muslim later. Harith bin Amr from Banu Nawfal. Then there were others such as Hakim bin Hizam, the one that I mentioned, who later became Muslim, and he purchased Darun Nadwa, sold Darun Nadwa. Then there was Umayyah bin Khalaf. Who was Umayyah? He was the master of Bilal radiallahu anhu. He used to abuse him and torture him a lot. Umayyah bin Khalaf. So as they convene for this meeting, an elderly man who no one knows arrives at the door. And they ask about his identity. Who is this man? Where are you from? He says, I'm from an area called Najd. Right? Najd is almost central, eastern central Arabia. Not far from Riyadh area. So far from Mecca. And the reason why he said he was from Najd is because if he said he was from Tihama, which is another region, they would assume that he is a supporter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or somebody who might have a soft spot for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, this person was shaitan in disguise. This was Iblis. This is what the reports that hadith mention. So this individual comes, this is shaitan, Iblis, and he's disguised as a human, and he says that I came all the way from Najd to join this meeting upon hearing about this very important matter, and I have deep concerns. Therefore, you should listen to my opinion and what I have to say. So based on this mutual hatred that they had, they allowed him to join the assembly. Otherwise, this is uncustomary for people to join such meetings. So he joins. Now, what happens? The council starts. One person suggests, let's bring Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad, let's chain him, let's imprison him, and let's let the people abuse him, and we'll keep him in that position until he dies. So the Najdi man, who's Iblis, says, this is not a good suggestion. It's not a good suggestion because it may happen so that his people will come, attack us, and they'll release him. We need a permanent solution. This is not a permanent solution. In fact, he may escape from our grasp. Let's think deeper. So another man suggests, why don't we just exile him? Let him go wherever he wants to go. At least he'll stop harassing us. Let's get him off our back. So the Najdi Sheikh, old man, who is Iblis, he responds again and says, perhaps he will join another group, and that group will become empowered. And after becoming empowered, they will become bold enough to attack us. This is also not a long-term solution. Let's think deeper. Then the biggest of the shayateen speaks. Who is that? Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl speaks. Abu Jahl says, I have an idea. Let us appoint from each clan a strong person, and we will equip him with a sharp sword, and they will all pounce upon Rasulullah Muhammad, ambush him, and strike him at one go. So his family cannot come after any one of us for blood money individually, but we will share the blood money, and it's easier for us to cope with Banu Hashim. Like all of us, they cannot come after all of us. So the Najdi old man, who is Iblis, he says, this is the one. This opinion is the right opinion. What we're learning from this is that Abu Jahl was bigger than Shaitan as well. Even the Najdi could not come up with such a suggestion, but Abu Jahl had this suggestion. Imagine how masterful he was in scheming and plotting, how much khubth and how much filth he had in his mind. Right? He wants to commit the biggest crime in history, which is the crime of killing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now what happens is Allah Azza wa Jal reveals to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the plan of the Quraysh. And this is the verse of Surah Al-Anfal, which is one of the important verses about the Hijrah. Allah says, وَإِذْ يَمْكُرُ بِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِيُثْبِتُوكَ أَوْ يَقْتُلُوكَ أَوْ يُخْرِجُوكَ. Allah is informing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam of their plan, about this council that is taking place, this mashwara or this consultation. Remember when those who disbelieve in Allah plotted against you. Remember the time when they plotted against you to either imprison you or murder you or exile you. وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهِ. They plan and Allah plans. Or they plot because Allah does not plot, Allah plans. Wallahu khairul makirin, and Allah is the best of planners. Urwa ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu says regarding the verse وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ, is that Allah has a solid plan, which is to release Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the shackles of the Quraysh or from the grasp of the Quraysh. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma also said that this verse of Surah Al-Anfal was about the council of the Quraysh. So this is the Mufassir of the Ummah, the most important commentator of the Quran, Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma, saying that this verse was about the consultation of the Quraysh to kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, one very important scholar in the last few centuries was Ali Tantawi rahimahullah. He says about this, just imagine for a moment, and it's interesting, think about this for a moment. Imagine if the Quraysh had succeeded in their plan that night. Imagine. There would be no Baghdad, there would be no Cairo, there would be no Damascus, there would be no Umayyad Caliphate, no Abbasid Caliphate, there would be no Khilafah Uthmaniyya. None of that would have happened. And Allah knows best where we would have been. Right? Of course, Allah had a different plan, but imagine if they had succeeded. Just think about that for a moment. This is one of those really important turning points in the history of Islam. Because had they stopped Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his tracks and succeeded in their mission to murder him, how would the truth of Islam have reached us? How would we have been rescued from ignorance and brought to guidance and light? So these are things for us to think about. Now the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam starts to move into gear. The revelation is revealed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam receives it. Now the plan is coming into motion. Allah is now granting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam permission to migrate. Your time has now come to migrate. Imam Ahmad and also Imam Tirmidhi rahimahumullah have narrated the hadith from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma. He says Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Mecca when he was instructed to migrate. The following verse was revealed to him. قُلْ رَبِّ أَدْخِلْنِي مُدْخَلَ صِدْقٍ وَأَخْرِجْنِي مُخْرَجَ صِدْقٍ وَاجْعَلْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ سُلْطَانًا نَصِيرًا. This is a verse of Surah Al-Isra. So Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma says, Allah taught this dua to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam during the hijrah. What is this dua? Oh my Lord, grant me an honorable entrance and an honorable exit. Meaning, allow me to enter Medina honorably and exit Mecca honorably. And give me a supporting authority. Meaning, give me a supporting authority, a helper, somebody to help me, assist me on the way. Of course, Allah assists His Anbiya with whom? Jibreel alayhi salatu salam. Jibreel alayhi salatu salam is the angel that Allah selects to help His prophets. I was mentioning to you guys earlier about the hikmah and the wisdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam being left behind and everybody migrating. And another interesting point. Who's left behind? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Abu Bakr, and who else? Ali radiallahu anhu. Two men who were the first to become Muslim after Khadija radiallahu anha, and two men who are now the last to migrate. Think about that. There's a virtue, there's a special thing about that. Two men who were the first to accept his message, and two that are the last to migrate with him. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed by Jibreel that they are going to ambush you at night. Their plan is to come at night time and encircle your home, surround your home, and they will attack you. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam informs Ali radiallahu anhu and instructs him to spend the night in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his bed and wrapped in his blanket. The blanket was a green Yemeni blanket from Hadrami blankets. That's honor. Now, self-sacrifice. The person to give himself up for self-sacrifice first in Islam is Ali radiallahu anhu. That's why he is the lion of Allah and the lion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Asadullah wa asadu rasulih. So self-sacrifice. He's ready to give himself up. No questions asked. Is this your instruction, O Rasulullah? I will spend the night in your bed. Absolutely, no problem. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam now goes to Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu's house to inform him. Now, there's a hadith of Bukhari. Aisha radiallahu anha says, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was coming to our house morning and evening. And then suddenly he came at an odd time. And his head was wrapped. We didn't know who it was. It was asked, who is it? He said, it's Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He entered. My father gave him a seat to sit. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, is anybody in the house? Ask them to leave. He says, it's only your family, O Rasulullah, meaning my daughters are there. Aisha, Asma radiallahu anha. And another beautiful thing she says in this hadith is, I've always known my parents to be Muslim because she was very young. She was born after Islam, right? She was very young. So Rasulullah, she said, my father and my mother, her mother's name was Ruman. Ruman. They were always Muslim as long as I know them. So then Rasulullah starts to speak. After he's assured that nobody else is in the house, then he says, the time has come. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instructed us to leave. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu looks up and says, Sohbah, I'm your companion. I'm with you. Sohbah, O Rasulullah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, yes, suhbah. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu starts to cry. And Aisha radiallahu anha says, I have never seen anybody cry for joy like I saw my father cry that day. She was young. This is honor. So he starts to weep, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And then he says, Oh Rasulullah, there are 2 camels that I've been preparing for this day. One is yours and one is mine. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, no, I'm going to pay you. That's interesting. Remember, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu was somebody that gave everything for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised him later on in life and said, this man has given everything of his for me, everything. Thanking him, praising him, showing gratitude, shukr. And he says, oh Rasulullah, if everything I own is not yours, then who is it for? Who is it for if it's not yours, oh Rasulullah? That level of love is unmatched. It's unrivaled. That level of love, loyalty to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's absolutely beautiful. It's amazing to read about, to see one human have that much dedication towards the cause of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that way. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose to pay for it. Why? Because the virtue of migrating with your own wealth and your own self is greater. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could have taken the animal for free. So the animal that he took, the animal's name was Jada'a. And this is actually the authentic name. There are some historians that have mentioned the name Qaswa. The name was Qaswa, but the authentic ahadith mentioned the name was Jada'a. Now Jada'a could be for 2 reasons, because Jada'a means a camel who has a cut ear. But some say no, it was actually the name of the camel. Allah knows best. So now things are moving into gear. Of course, they wanted to take a path that was unusual, a route that was unknown, rather than taking the most obvious route. So they chose a dalil. Dalil is a guide, a navigator. And he was a well-known navigator. His name was Abdullah bin Urayqit. Abdullah bin Urayqit was not a Muslim, but he was a very trustworthy person. And that was the quality and chivalrousness of the Arabs. Even though Abdullah bin Urayqit knows that the Quraysh are after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they have a deal. They have an agreement. They're not going to break the agreement. We're going to pay you and you're going to navigate for us. You're going to be the guide. And this also shows that you can, because Ibn Hajar says that as far as he knows, Abdullah bin Urayqit did not become Muslim from his research on the issue. So Abdullah bin Urayqit was hired, so a non-Muslim was hired by Muslims for this journey. And also another thing that the scholars of hadith derive from this is that 2 people can hire 1 person for 1 task, right? So 2 people hiring the services of 1 person for 1 task. Now, something strange, another strange thing, very strange. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was leaving Mecca, escaping the Quraysh. The Quraysh wanted to kill him and murder him. But they had left and deposited with him many of their possessions. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known as what? As-Sadiq and Al-Amin, the truthful one and the trustworthy one. Even before his nubuwah. And it was important that he had these traits so that when he becomes a prophet of Allah, people cannot doubt his trustworthiness. Disbelievers had left valuable possessions of theirs with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a deposit to safeguard for them. Anything that they feared upon, they would leave with him. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had lots of goods of the Quraysh. It also shows the trustworthiness of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he did not deceive them or fraud them. These are people that are about to kill you and murder you, and you have their goods, you have their wealth. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't take any of it with him. In fact, he instructed Ali radiallahu anhu whose belongings were there and to ensure that everybody receives their belongings before he migrates to Medina Munawwara. And Ali radiallahu anhu carried out that task. So Allah says in the Quran, which is a verse that can allude to this, قد نعلم إنه ليحزنك الذي يقولون فإنهم لا يكذبونك ولكن الظالمين بآيات الله يجحدون. We certainly know that what they say, meaning the disbelievers say about you, grieves you, it pains you. But it is not your honesty that they question, because they know you're an honest person. Rather, they are wrongdoers who deny the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now what happens? The Quraysh, they encircle and surround the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The time arrives. As the night is coming and it's evening time, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was home, fully aware of their plots. When it became dark, some of those individuals from the Quraysh started to circle the house. Abu Jahl was there, Hakam ibn Abil As, Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayt, Umayyah bin Khalaf, his brother Ubay bin Khalaf, Zam'a bin Aswad, Abu Lahab, Nubayh bin Hajjaj. All these people were gathered outside the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, surrounding it. Abu Jahl decides to be arrogant, and he's telling the people, this man inside, he was telling us that if we follow him, then we'll be successful. When we are resurrected, we'll have gardens like the gardens of Jordan, meaning Jannah. And that if we reject him, then we will perish. And when we die, we'll be resurrected into the fire, and the fire will be burning us. He's laughing and he's mocking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even at this moment of time. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam realized that they had already encircled the house, this is when he instructed Ali radiallahu anhu, get into the bed and you pretend that you are the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in my bed. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decides to leave the house. He leaves the house, which shows many things. He leaves the house, first of all, with dust in his hand, throwing the dust and reciting the verses of Surah Yasin. Right? And it shows what? It shows the bravery of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It shows his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it shows Allah's divine assistant for his servants, his friends, his awliya. Three things it shows. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam leaves the house and they don't even realize that he has left the house. And he's reciting these verses of the Quran, powerful verses. Yasin wal Quran al Hakim, innaka lamin al mursaleen ala siratim mustaqim. Yasin, by the Quran, rich in wisdom. Indeed, you are from the messengers upon a straight path. Tanzeel al-Aziz al-Rahim. This is a revelation from the Almighty, most merciful. لِتُنذِرْ قَوْمًا مَا أُنذِرَ آبَاؤُهُمْ فَهُمْ غَافِلُونَ. So that you may warn a people whose forefathers were not warned, but they have become heedless. لَقَدْ حَقَّ الْقَوْلُ عَلَىٰ أَكْثَرِهِمْ. Allah's decree of torment has already been justified against most of them. They will not be believers. It is as if we have put shackles around their necks up to their chins, so their heads are forced up. We have placed a barrier before them and a barrier behind them and covered them all up, so they fail to see the truth. While he recited these verses, he's walking past, flickering that dust, and Allah causes the people to become blind for a moment, and they can't see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he leaves in this manner. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrives at Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's house. Aisha radiallahu anha says that I had prepared some provision for them, and they leave the house of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu from a small door, a hidden door. And rather than taking the normal route, which is north to go Medina, they decide to go south. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew that the Quraysh will be eagerly searching for him, and they will be going to the most obvious spots and points to look for him. Therefore, it's better for us to deceive them, to con them. So let's go south and let's wait for a few moments and for a few days. And they had informed Abdullah bin Urayqit al-Laythi that we will be in the cave of Thawr. Come and meet us in 3 nights in the cave of Thawr. And the cave of Thawr is upon a mountain which is quite mountainous, with large boulders, difficult to climb. If you've been there, you would see lots of people when they go Mecca, they go to do ziyarah and they see these sites, and some people even attempt to climb it. I remember I made intention to climb it and I never did it. I'm going to be honest with you, right? I was about 16 years old. And I never took any sneakers with me. And we went to buy sneakers. We went and bought the sneakers. Then the next morning I went there with my brother, my older brother. And I just looked up and I said, you go ahead, inshallah, and meet me at the hotel later on. And he did it, mashallah. His name is Sulaiman. So he did it, and I didn't. I still remember that day. And he still makes fun of me about that. So, last sight of Mecca. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, now he's seeing Mecca for the last time, the Kaaba for the last time. And of course, naturally, your hometown is your hometown. Hometown is hometown for everybody, right? If you're from Pakistan, you're from India, you're from Saudi, you're from Egypt, Bangladesh, wherever you're from, London, right? Hometown is hometown, always. I mean, for me, hometown is London. I was born there, raised there. My father's hometown is Surat, Gujarat, India. This is where he is right now, and he wants to stay there all the time. He doesn't want to go back to London, but he has to because my mum doesn't like India as much. So, if he wants to be fed and cooked for, he has to go back to London. He can't. So she only goes because of him. But anyway, if it was up to him, he would live there all the time. And I always say to him, I think you like India more than your own children and your grandchildren as well. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is looking back at Makkah Mukarramah. Of course, Makkah is not just his hometown, it's a very special town because Baytullah is there, Al-Masjid al-Haram is there. Allah Azza wa Jal's specific light is shining on that city. Reflections of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's nur is on that city. This is the place of the first revelation to be revealed. This is a very, very special city. And the cities where the revelation is revealed, they're cities of barakat. Right? It's a reflection of Allah's mercy on those places. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam looks back at Makkah and says, Wallah, by Allah, innaki la khayru ardillah. You are the most beloved of Allah's lands to me. Wa ahabbu ardillahi ilallah. And you are the most beloved of Allah's lands to Allah as well. وَلَوْلَا أَنِّي أُخْرِجْتُ مِنْكِ مَا خَرَجْتُ. And if I had not been forced out of this town, I would never have left you. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying to the city of Makkah. Ibn Hibban has mentioned in his Sahih from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there is no beautiful city than you, no purer and tayyib city than you, no more beloved city than you. And if my people did not force me out, I would never live in a town other than you. Ma sakantu ghayrak. Right? Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed that inshallah you will return to Makkah one day. We're going to end with this. While Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is leaving, however, Allah does reveal a verse to him. إِنَّ الَّذِي فَرَضَ عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لَرَادُّكَ إِلَى مَعَادٍ. The one that has revealed the Quran upon you, he will return you to Makkah. Ma'ad ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says, is Makkah. Imam Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi says that this verse, which is at the end of Surah Al-Qasas, which is in the 20th juz of the Quran, is an indication that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is giving him glad tidings that you will return to Makkah, and you won't just return to Makkah, you will return victoriously. Because Surah Al-Qasas, whose story is in that surah? Musa alayhi salam. Right? Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam left, and then he came back. And he came back and he challenged Fir'aun. So this is an indication to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and which shows us lots of things, brothers and sisters. What it shows us is that the stories of the Quran aren't random. They're not random stories that Allah brings. Allah doesn't just bring the story of Musa alayhi salam time and again, randomly. Nothing's random about the Quran. It's deep. The wisdom is deep. The themes are deep. The coherence is deep. That's why we have to continue pondering, reflecting. Nobody can ever say, I am the alim of the Quran. Nobody. Because you can't. You cannot fully grasp all of the words of the Lord. Because His hikmah and His wisdom is unlimited. It's infinite. It never ends. What does Allah say? قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَدَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي وَلَوْ جِئْنَا بِمِثْلِهِ مَدَدًا. If all of the oceans were ink, or turned into ink to write the words of your Lord, the ink will dry, or ink will run out. But the words of your Lord will never run out. Right? Even if you brought an equivalent amount, it will never run out. So the Quran, the more we reflect, more beautiful points come out, inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala grant us tawfiq, inshallah. Next week we'll continue with the story, because it starts to get even more interesting now. The search is on. The search for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What happens thereafter? Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka. Yes, bro.